how do you mentor the next generation? This past Saturday at Men's Coffee, Dan shared this amazing teaching time about how to mentor Generation Z, and I thought it was so captivating, so good. I wanted to bring the amazing understanding, the wisdom, the depth of insight that Dan had that morning.
I need to go back and listen to this. I must have still been at that time in the morning. I was still asleep.
I know. There's nothing like Dan walking into a room at 7 a.m.
Yeah, realizing that I had gotten out of bed at 6:56.
Dan is like, he is running. He's like, that's not your optimal best.
No,
right?
It's not. I'm not ashamed of that. But
hey,
I'll arm wrestle you at 3 in the morning.
I am Ben. I'm here with Dan. We are the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship Church in Cornelius, North Carolina. And like I said, we are going to be doing a couple episodes on mentoring the next generation. And so, Dan, I know I was just kind of being, a little goofy up front, but I really thought when I was done, and the men that were in that room, I thought were really, I felt like we got a better grasp of what Generation Z is all about and what we can do to help mentor them. And you kind of painted this picture of who they are, what we need to know, how do we build bridges into that generation. And I just left knowing that I have 3 kids myself that are in Gen Z. I left there with a sense of gratitude that I was able to hear all the things that you shared, but also a sense of like, yeah, we can do this. Because I think a lot of times, Dan, wouldn't you agree? A lot of people look at the younger generation and they're thinking, what's wrong with these,
Well, both that, like, what's wrong with these whippersnappers?
Yeah.
Get off my grass. But the other thing is they're intimidating because, they're...
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I faced that to some extent a lot when I was running day schools, though. High school kids can be intimidating. They're smart. They're smart Alex.
They speak a different language.
They speak a different language. They look at you as if you're old when you're not. I mean, literally in my 20s, they kept talking about how old I was. A lot of those kind of things. They're just coming into adulthood. They've got the world by the
frontal lobe is not developed.
It's not
yet.
developed. Therefore, they say exactly what's on their mind, and often it's cruel, make you go home and cry. But no, but mentoring the next generation, I think, is really, really important because it is a huge privilege and opportunity for all of us. I've enjoyed it. I think part of it was because I spent early years of my ministry teaching high schoolers.
Mm-hmm.
They have never intimidated me, but they do. I'm very curious about them.
Yeah.
And then each generation has changed. So I've watched dramatic changes in the kids that I've worked with who were in their teens and early 20s. Obviously, I'm a college professor, but that has only been limited help to me because I'm a graduate school professor, so I've got students literally older than me, and that's saying something.
Mm-hmm.
But having worked with them now in our church for over 5 years, and then raising some as well, mine are just now leaving that Zoomer stage. But so we're doing 2 episodes, correct?
Yeah, we're going to try to do
okay,
it.
so what I think the first episode we need to focus on why do they call them Zoomers and the characteristics of them. Then we'll kind of make a segue into the second episode and talk about how we can reach them.
Sounds great.
So, initially, first of all, it's a biblical mandate that older people are supposed to be speaking into the lives of younger people.
Yes, absolutely.
And also, it's a part of the biblical mandate, by the way, that older people ought to be listening to the younger people. And I think that's both so that we can guide them, but also so we don't lose touch generationally.
Yeah.
Titus chapter 2 talks about that. But even in the Old Testament, the old men, see visions. Was it the old men see visions and the young men? I don't know. I can't remember, but there's constant scriptures, that compare old men with young men, older ladies mentoring younger ladies. But these characteristics for this generation are unique. One of them is, first of all, these kids were born into a post 9/11 world.
Yes.
And ironically, today is the anniversary that we're taping this is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
For my grandparents, even my parents to some extent, Pearl Harbor was the event,
the
that kind of
defining moment. Yes.
Yeah, everybody knew where they were. Yep. The nation changed in one minute.
Whereas the boomer generation was like the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah,
right.
The next generation behind them, but that was their moment. And that's when the world, but for all of them, a lot of times that moment is when they feel less safe.
Yes.
So most of these kids, by the way, though, don't remember
No.
9/11,
Absolutely.
but the world changed as they
Yes.
were being born.
I remember Liz was taking me to work at Northside Baptist Church, and she was going to drop me off, and then she was taking Jaden to his 2-week appointment,
Wow.
to the doctor appointment on that day. And I remember we turned on the radio, and we're hearing about there was a plane that crashed into one of the twin. And the first one, we were just kind of like, oh, there must have been a
Horrible accident.
And then all of a sudden you get, and it's like the video of the second one going in. And I remember what you just said is, wow, this is going to change our world. This is going to change our nation. I don't know how, but it's going to change us. And I think that those events of it, just having a newborn, my firstborn child, and then that happening, it was like, whoa.
Yeah.
There was a massive shift that happened, but you're right. They were born into, they don't know what the world was like prior to 9/11.
Right. And the 80s and 90s, while they were a weird generation, they were rather there was a brief period of time where we had conflict in Nicaragua,
Yeah.
and then another one in
We had a desert storm that lasted like a month.
Yeah. It was just 100 hours, I think
Yeah.
the actual war was. So it shattered. I mean, you used to be able to go greet people as they walked off the plane. You didn't have to strip naked to go through security.
Yeah.
All the different things that changed even with that. And even the first year or two afterwards, you just kind of looked at each other just like, are you a good guy, a bad guy? When you
Yeah.
got on the plane, it was nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So all of that said, the world into which they were born was not like the world into which their parents were born.
Yeah.
Secondly, and these are not in any particular order or necessarily connected, but the Generation Z, and by the way, let's make sure we understand, Generation Z are people roughly born from year 2000 forward.
2000 forward, yeah.
Yeah, so-
Until about 2 years ago.
Yeah. So and there'll be people that say, "Oh, I saw 1998," and whatever. But I mean, this is what we're generally
Right,
speaking.
right.
The second thing is that they're digitally overconnected and skilled. In fact, they're called the generation of the digital natives.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of digital technological change that took place in the 70s and 80s. We
Mhm.
literally, went and through the 90s. We literally went where when I was taught math, we didn't have calculators. We had slide rules,
Mhm.
and I was like a sophomore. Then the first calculator came out that used D batteries and cost $100.
The moment at Life Talks when Dan reveals he's old.
He's old, way old. So, but it's been really cool in my lifetime. I've gone from the slide rule
Yeah.
to where they're talking about implanting chips that'll do calculations in your brain.
I know, isn't that?
Yeah,
It's scary.
It is very scary, but it is scary for us. It's not scary for Generation Z kids.
No.
It's normal. This is what they do.
I mean, there was a show that there was one of these Star Wars shows that me and my boys watched, and it was all about this wasn't the main point of the show, but it was set in this time period where people could get digital upgrades on their bodies to do
Mhm.
certain things, and you're like, for me, I look at that and I'm horrified.
Mhm.
It is like, that sounds terrifying to me. But for their generation, it's kind of like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You're like, what is going on here?
Yeah, we saw a cashless society as a sign that the end was here and the Antichrist was somewhere.
The barcode.
Yeah, the barcodes. Yeah, and the reality is, most of our kids don't carry cash.
Nope.
They don't balance their checkbooks,
Mm-mm.
and they use Venmo, not credit cards.
That's right.
So there's a lot of things, digitally that have changed for them
There's
because
so-
of
there-
that. They're sophisticated
Yes.
in both language and in technology
Yeah.
and applications of it in ways that their parents aren't and never will be. For us, it will always be an intruder into our life as it was established. For them, it's a welcome friend that they've known since the day they were born.
Absolutely. And that does change the way they relate to people,
Oh,
right? I
yeah.
mean, there's a massive relationship thing that what the digital world does is it creates a whole new operating system of how they relate. And I think that's something that we have to understand that
Yeah.
from them.
And again, just 40 years ago, it was not uncommon for people to just drop by somebody's house and say, "Hey, how y'all doing?" And just shoot the breeze
Oh
a
man,
little bit.
I remember when people stopped by your house. It was normal.
Yeah, and today the equivalent of that is to drop somebody a text.
Yeah.
WYB, where you been?
Yeah.
It's-
Can you imagine someone dropping by your house today? You would be like, what is wrong with you?
yeah. Well, I wouldn't answer the door. I tell everybody be quiet and wait till they leave. And the reason I know that's what I would do is because that's what I've done. The third thing is this is a big thing. We hear a lot about it, but they're ridden with mental health concerns.
Oh man.
Whether it's anxiety, depression, OCD, ADHD, they know all the maladies and the
I mean, you could call it the disorder generation because everyone claims a disorder, a mental disorder of some kind.
yeah, and let's. I want to be careful here, but it is trendy. And there is going to be perhaps a little bit of inflation of the reality based on its trendiness. I believe
Yes.
that's very, very true of things like sexual orientation
Yeah.
and sexual identity, those kind of things.
100%. Yeah.
At the same time, when the trendiness leaves it, I still believe that there has been a significant uptick for a variety of reasons, among them being overly connected to technology, being born into a world at war, having COVID hit them in their
Yes.
formative years.
Yeah.
All of those things have created some anxiety and some stress. On top of the fact that the world is just more complicated and
Yeah.
the media is just so much louder, and media, including social media.
Mhm.
It's everywhere. It permeates every part of our life. There is no rest from it. From the moment they get up, the first thing they do is check their messages to their texts. To the last thing they do at night is watch the latest TikTok video.
Yeah, and it's something I'm not sure that I don't mean to veer us off too much, but it feels like there's this apocalyptic threat that they have. I mean, maybe it's post 9/11, but even if you look at all the movies, I relate a lot of the apocalyptic movies that are out today. A lot of zombie movies, a lot of end of the world movies that they're normal, right? And it's very similar to the type of genre of literature that was around during Jesus' time, where they always felt like this is the end.
Yeah.
But when you subconsciously when you're always watching shows about the end of the world, there's no sense of tomorrow is not secure.
Right.
And so you can understand why there's this level of anxiety that has been bred into them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
and I think to some extent, parents have kind of infected their kids. This isn't one of my points, but if I were to add an 11th point, this would be it. I believe we've overparented.
oh, 100%.
And by that, I would say the kids that are growing up to now have been so raised in such a fear-based culture that their parents were afraid to let them play in their yard. The parents were afraid to let them, engage in normal social interactions, even like in a store. I was walking through the store one day and a little girl started talking to me and I was smiling back at her, and the mother kind of walks up to her like, what are you doing?
Do not,
Yeah. And the little girl looks up and says, "Oh, it's okay, Mom. He's old." but obviously there've been conversations that have taken place there.
Yeah.
That and I'm nervous to talk to children. It used to be, you'd talk and give them a sucker, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And today
Now it's
no,
creepy old
you know,
old man.
Creepy old Dan. So you got to watch out that. And the fourth thing is they were very heavily impacted by COVID. Stop and
Yes.
think about it. You're in your 40s. I'm in my 60s. For us, that represented at most 2-3% of our life. But for somebody who's 20, COVID was represented 10 to 20% of their life. So that's a significant shift.
Absolutely.
And so for a lot of our kids, again, this hyper fear, this sensitivity to catastrophe, and
The isolation.
the isolation,
Yes.
whether from instruction, and we're starting to see stunning test results. I was this morning just listening to an article. Many colleges are not even using ACTs
Because
and SATs.
they lost a generation.
They
it
lost a
feels like.
generation, and there's social reasons behind it too that have to do with our wokeism. But the reality is, a lot of kids suffered academically,
Yeah.
and that is going to ripple through our economy, our research, everything for 100 years.
Yeah.
Another thing is that they actively question authority of all kinds.
This is not a shock.
They're
If you are a parent right now, you're like, duh.
yeah. Well, teenagers have always struggled with the shift that comes with becoming an adult and the authorities in their life.
But we're talking all authority.
All authority, parental authority, spiritual
They don't
authority,
care if there's
political authority,
if there's
legal authority.
letters before your name or after a name. It means nothing to them.
And the culture has done a really, really great job of contributing to that.
Yeah.
Both by overt rebellion and also by undermining our own reputations.
Yeah.
And young people are very idealistic. They can smell a hypocrite from a mile and a half away.
Yeah.
So when we give them reasons to mistrust us, they will take those.
Yeah.
And then the media amplifies them as well. The next one is they're very comfortable with duplicity and dualism. So they have learned to survive philosophically, behaviorally, emotionally, relationally, um, by compartmentalizing their life. Dualism is probably an oversimplification because it kind of assigns two, and it's a lot more than two.
I mean, they're just, I think maybe a better way to put it is they're chameleons.
Yeah,
You know, they kind of blend in wherever they go to adapt to the environment that they're in.
And we're all prone to that. I remember when I was a kid, the preachers would talk about that. You're in your honky tonk on Saturday night, and on Sunday morning you're singing in the choir. What has happened now, though, is they're not ashamed of that.
No,
they're comfortable.
There's
with that.
nothing to hide.
They love Jesus, and they love Tinder.
Yeah.
They love.
They have no problem playing in a worship band and also doing drugs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this dualism, I believe, also is a reflection of where they're at spiritually. They consider themselves spiritual, and by spiritual, I would say not in terms of a relationship with God, but in a relationship with the mysterious, the unknown, that part of them that is unique. It's interesting how often many of them are infatuated with things like Buddhism, and New Age and so forth, which has even less. It has even less foundation upon its validity than Christianity or even the monotheistic religions. However, it allows them to define and redefine freely. More so because there's not an absolute as big an absolute component in like
because
Buddhism
I don't think they want to say no to anything.
No. Which brings me to the dominant religious belief of Generation Z is therapeutic moral deism. So
we did a few episodes on that.
We did at some point ago, but I would just simply say the research shows that they wouldn't know the term. Therapeutic moral deism, but if you know the term, you say, "Oh yeah, that's absolutely this generation," which basically is they believe in a higher power, a God of some sort, many for cultural reasons or simply because they don't know what else to believe in. But this God is very malleable, and he looks just like them.
He cares about if they feel better.
It's all about feelings. And are you happy? That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
Are you happy? So God created me this way. This makes me happy. God wants me to be happy. That's one of his tenets. None of which are based on anything authoritative other than what they've assigned to the God in their life. But they do believe that there is a need for basic morality, but that doesn't come from God. It actually comes from man. So and belief in God will make you a better person therapeutically.
Yeah.
The next one is they're very entrepreneurial. And they think outside the box, which we always, we love that. Think outside the box. For years, man, we lived in the box.
Yeah.
You dressed a certain way. You worked 9 to 5.
My kids will tell me how much every YouTuber they watch makes per year. YouTuber, TikTok, whatever they're watching, they're like, this person makes X amount of dollars doing what they're doing. And so there's a part of this generation that thinks, I can find a way to monetize anything.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have this idea of creating wealth, which is kind of a cool thing.
Which
right?
is kind of interesting also because the monetization is dependent upon consumerism.
Right.
Because they're selling advertising. That's how they make their money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet they would claim to be anti-consumeristic. So it is kind of an interesting circle. But they do think outside the box. They don't want to work at an office. They want to work from home.
Yeah.
They want to work from the road. They want to work from the Starbucks.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily want to work 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or whatever. They want to work when it's convenient for them. And by the way, I think there's some good things in this. I think we became slaves to our jobs, slaves to our employers. Part of the American success story has been our stunning work ethic. I think Japan takes it all to a whole new level. But at some point, Americans, and I'd love to do an episode on my theory on this, but we are rebels. That's how we got here. And we're entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are the people who would get in a boat and sail across an ocean to get a fresh start.
That's right.
It's not going to be your faithful, duty-driven 9 to 5 person.
Absolutely, 100%.
So in our DNA, the people that settled this country have passed that on quite well. It's more than just our culture, I believe. The ninth thing is that they they embrace very blurry values.
Hmm.
They again are malleable. What we used to say, well, the Bible says it, that settles it, I believe it. But the reality is, they're more influenced by what their friends are doing
That's
or
right.
somebody they know.
That's right.
One of the used to be very clear black and whites on morality,
Mm-hmm.
but then they know a lot of people who are now divorced, who are gay, who are
Yeah.
trans, who are all
Yeah.
these things, and now their morality has shifted because the higher morality in their culture and the way they've been reared is to be acceptant, tolerant, and embracing.
Mm.
So the DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion mentality that we see corporately is very much um, at root in the hearts of the
Yes.
individuals.
Yes.
Then the last thing is they're very frightened by the future. You
Mm.
talk to a lot of Generation Z kids, and they'll tell you, "We don't want to have children."
Yeah, they might get married someday.
Yeah.
But they're not. Yeah, they're not going to have children. They don't
Yeah.
want. They don't want to bring children into this world.
And there's that's the primary thing is that they're uncertain of the future. They don't want to inflict that on their kids. Some of it is they truly consider it environmentally irresponsible
Hmm.
because their culture again has grown up with the idea that we're murdering our planet.
Hmm.
So humans are the enemies. I mean, there's literally now a new movement out that is promoting the extinction of the human race, that it would
Hmm.
eventually completely be killed out,
Hmm.
and theoretically, in their worldview, that evolution would have to start all over again.
Yeah.
So these are people that are voices in their life. You and I, as mature adults who've seen other things, look at it and say, "Oh, well, that's a load of baloney."
Yeah.
They listen to it and say, "That's a valid, rational
Yeah.
proposition."
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's kind of a background for when you're talking to Zoomers. That's a part of where they're not every Zoomer is the same.
Yeah.
But it's a generalization. I think it's a pretty
Yeah,
pretty
I think
official one.
what you shared today was really important because I think it does give us a very good understanding of the dimensions of these young people that we're dealing with. And if you don't understand this, then you're not going to know how to reach them. You're not going to know how to lead them. And so, anyways, that's what we're going to talk about next time. I hope this has been an enlightening episode for you. Maybe you have kids that are Gen Z, maybe you have grandkids, maybe you just are interested in impacting the next generation. But whatever that might be, I hope that this has been an episode that has challenged your thinking, not to complain, not to, look at them, look down upon this next generation, but to look at who they are and what they are, and to see the great opportunity we have to impact them for Jesus Christ. Thanks again for joining us today on Life Talks. We'll talk to you next time.